Okay, we're back. Episode 63 of Red versus Blue. It's been a while. And when we last left you, first of all, let me say hello to Keith. How you doing?
I'm good, Mike. How are you?
Very good. When we left you last, everything was Epstein. Epstein this, Epstein that. What do we have on as an update for that? Because it's certainly not the top of the list right now, is it?
Well, it's not the top of the list, but it's still on the list. It's month number 2 for the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. The administration thought they were going to get behind it somehow by releasing information. Apparently, most of the information they released had already been in the public domain. There was really nothing new. They did an interview with Ghislaine Maxwell. She ultimately got transferred to a much more friendly prison in Texas. As a result of that, in the interview, she, of course, says that she never saw anything untowards involving Donald Trump. But then again, she never saw anything untoward involving anybody. She was just an innocent bystander. So her testimony has been instantly condemned by the victims and has been contradicted by the public record from her conviction. Nonetheless, she was trotted out in a vain attempt to maybe provide some cover for the president. The victims have been outraged by this, and what has not been released is the references to Donald Trump in the file. Now, we know there's references to Trump because he was briefed on that in May by Pam Bondi. We know he's in there because Congressman Collins from Georgia just said so at in a hot mic in a town hall in his district, that he's on the committee, he's seen the files, he knows he's there. So we know there's stuff there. I don't personally believe that it's evidence of Trump with a 16-year-old girl. What I do believe is it's a lot of evidence of Epstein and Trump being each other's wingman, going around New York to various fashion shows and him getting let into behind the scenes of the Trump beauty pageants. I suspect there's something in there that involves Melania, because apparently Epstein knew Melania before Trump did, and that's why Melania was so quick to file a $1 billion lawsuit for somebody who alleged that they were introduced by Epstein. So there's smoke there, so there's some fire. We'll see what's going to happen. In the meantime, Alex Acosta, who Trump had selected as his labor secretary in the first term, was the U.S. attorney that cut a sweetheart deal for Epstein down in Florida. He is going to be subpoenaed and will be interviewed by Congress. So any thought that Epstein is going away soon should be put aside.
There you go. But it was knocked out of the news by the situation with Russia and Ukraine and the visit from Putin, right?
Well, it was. And that shows you just the lengths that the administration was willing to go to sort of try and move Epstein off of the front pages. They had a summit in Alaska. They could do it in Alaska because he did not have to fly over any countries where he was an indicted war criminal to get there. And America doesn't recognize the International Court of Justice. So that's why it was in Alaska, because it kept him from being pulled over in space by a fighter jet and arrested and put cuffs on. They had their talk. Nothing really came of it. Zelensky he had a backpack. He was ready to go and apparently bought a new suit. He was ready to go anywhere that the president wanted. They had a meeting in D.C. To their credit, all of the European leaders rallied behind Zelensky. They came to Washington and praised Trump up and down in order to make sure that he didn't give away the store or do anything stupid. He immediately announced that Zelensky and Putin were going to have a meeting. It was probably going to be in Budapest because they've got a friendly government there that also doesn't respect the criminal court. And then the Russians said, we're really not going to do that. It's not time yet. We don't have the right agenda yet, which means the surrender. Plus, we're too busy attacking. So Trump gave him 2 more weeks. He came out and said that he's been settling 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 wars. Who knows? I think he's going to take credit for settling the war between the Federation and the Klingons pretty soon. But nothing's happened.
Yeah.
And it's time. And I think Trump now realizes that he's been played for a fool. He realizes, because it was all on world television, how the European leaders have sort of learned how to play him to keep him from making mistakes. And even Donald Trump has a limit to how much humiliation he can take in public. And hopefully he will put sanctions on and give them the arms that they need to adequately defend themselves in Ukraine, who are doing a damn good job of it, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. And then back home, in preparation for the midterm elections, both parties have been busy working on reapportionment.
Well, they have. And of course, we reapportion every year in the years that begin with 2, like 02, 22, et cetera. You have new districts, and those are supposed to last for the decade. But because of various court challenges and the fact that Trump brought the Texas legislators and governor together and said, I need 5 more seats, Texas decided to move early and create 5 Republican seats. The Texas House members left for a while, went out of state where they were out of the jurisdiction of the state marshal. But ultimately, they had to comply and come back because they were going to continue to call special sessions until they finally got the thing passed.
Right.
In retaliation, Gavin Newsom called the California legislature together. California is a different situation. Here we have a constitutionally mandated commission to do reapportionment. It was approved by the voters. It's in the Constitution. He has to go seek a exemption from our own constitutional law so that California can provide 5 more Democratic seats, and that's subject to an election this November. In Utah, courts have said that they have improperly reapportioned, and that will likely result in a new Democratic seat centered in Salt Lake City that had been dismembered. This week, the Indiana legislative leadership met at the White House trying to see if they could eliminate the 1 Democratic seat out of Indiana. So you've got a state-by-state battle going on to see who can jimmy their maps the most to produce a partisan advantage. Now, all of this is for one reason. It's for Trump to avoid congressional oversight during his last 2 years, which he faced before, and dearly wants to avoid this time. So that is what is driving all of this, and it's going to end up costing California its Republican clout in the House of Representatives, which will be devastating for the state and devastating for the California Republican Party. Trump is betting on the Hispanic vote in Texas. He got 51% last time, but new polls show Hispanics disapprove of Trump and his immigration policies by 70%. 51% strongly disapprove.
Wow.
So this could end up being a bad bet in a year where Trump is not going to be on the ballot, where the incumbent party typically does worse, and where the Democrats are going to be highly fired up. So despite the purported changes people have made, don't bet the farm on the outcome of the election, because I think Trump is still, and the Republicans are still going to be in trouble with this.
It's a bad situation for him anyway, because it's traditional that the ruling party usually loses the midterms, and they seem to have made things worse.
They potentially made things worse. I mean, they're trying to stave it off by picking up those 5 seats in Texas. They didn't plan on losing the 5 in California. The others are going to be sort of at the margin. But if it's a typical election where Republicans can lose up to 10 or more seats, none of this is going to make a difference, frankly.
Gotcha.
But it's certainly not going to provide the margin that they thought it was going to provide when they sat down and came up with this big idea with Governor Abbott of Texas.
Gotcha. Okay. We're going to solve crime in at least D.C., right?
The occupied territory of the District of Columbia, Trump has called out the National Guard. Many of them from West Virginia and Mississippi have gone to patrol the streets of Washington. For the first week, they had no guns, so thank God they didn't actually come across any gang violence, because they would have taken the short end of that. For the most part, they're not in the high crime areas of D.C. They're in the tourist locations, in the transportation subway stations, and at the national monuments where there's, frankly, not a lot of crime. This is being done at a cost of hundreds of millions of dollars. And bear in mind what a National Guard soldier is. He's not a full-time soldier. He's a guy who's a truck driver or a teacher or a storekeeper or a laborer. And that's usually his primary income. And he signed up for the Guard because he's a veteran or because he wanted a little additional income. And he goes 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks in the summer. And that's his Guard obligation.
Right.
But now these guys, these men and women, are going to be deployed in Washington, D.C. for a month or more at a time, likely forcing them to lose the job they had back home, certainly impacting their income. Likely it's the start of school all over America, so they're not going to be there to see their kids in school. Some of these are one-parent families. So it's a really, the burden nobody's really talked about is falling on these guardsmen themselves, who have been forced to endure this. Now, this is all part of a move by Trump to look like he's Mr. Law and Order. They did indict, and they felony indicted a Justice Department employee who threw a Subway sandwich at a Homeland Security officer. Twice now, the grand jury has refused to indict the sandwich thrower. So they are left with not being able to bring to trial. They'll probably charge him with a misdemeanor, which doesn't require an indictment. to try and prove their point. But the administration is looking pretty embarrassed by the whole thing. The U.S. Department of Transportation announced today they're going to take over and operate Union Station. I worked at the Department of Transportation. Back then, we had the Coast Guard in the department. They actually carried guns. Nobody there now actually carries guns. So they're not going to provide any additional security. Lord knows they can't make the trains run any better. So God only knows what they're going to do. Now, the Democrats are stuck with an answer. They don't know what to do. They've started off with, well, crime is not that bad in D.C. It's better than it's ever been. Well, it is better than it's ever been. I lived there in the 80s and I visited in the 70s when it was much worse. I saw some newscaster on TV said, well, I was there in the 90s. That's when it was bad. And it is just like all over the country. Crime is less evident now than it was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Not to say it's that they don't have crime. But the Democrats still haven't got a good answer for how to deal and how to respond to Trump.
Right.
And I want to give Gavin Newsom, let's recognize his effort, because he has taken the Trump advertisements and he's put himself into them and he's memeing them and he is like trolling Trump with all of this stuff. And is it immature? Does it distract from Newsom's reputation as a statesman or a leader? Well, of course it does. It makes him look like a cartoon. They are cartoons. But what it really does is it holds up a mirror to the stuff that Trump is doing. And it shows all the Trump supporters who sit there and go, Gavin Newsom holding the flag, Gavin Newsom riding a bear, Gavin Newsom holding Melania. How ridiculous is that? And then it forces them to think, well, who did that before? Right. Well, Donald Trump, but it's Trump. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
And so it's going to spin them all up. And it's I guess the fun part of politics. It's what passes for the fun part of politics these days.
Yeah, and props to the writers for Newsom, because he can't be doing all of that. He had to have hired some writers for that.
I'm sure he hired some guy, some 23-year-old with pimples and a computer who churns all this stuff out in some basement when he's not playing video games.
Right, because it is pretty good most of the time. It's pretty awesome. And I was with you. At first I thought, oh, this is stupid. And then I go, well, it's stupidity fighting stupidity. So it kind of fits okay.
Well, and it's the mirror that is held up to Trump, and it lets his supporters look at that and say, yeah, maybe that was ridiculous.
Okay, so let's take this D.C. thing a little further. Now, legally, he can do this in D.C. because D.C. is not a state. It's run by the federal government, right?
Right. They have a modicum of home rule, but that can be overruled by the president.
Right.
I think this is really, frankly, Mike, a test drive for January 6, 2029, when it comes time to certify the next election, and whether or not he can get by with putting troops on the street to prevent the Congress from doing what they need to do. We'll see.
The other thing is now he's threatening to go into states and put these troops. And there's a different complexion to that, right? Because now we're getting into state rights and things like that, correct?
Right. The National Guard typically serves at the direction of the governor. The governor has a guard general who reports to the governor. To take that authority away, it was done very limitedly by Eisenhower during the civil rights era to open schools. It really hasn't, and it was done during the Los Angeles riots. Hasn't really been done since then. And so this is going to be a new thing of sending troops into American cities. The guy that won't give the Ukrainians the weapons they need to fight seems very willing to invade America.
Yeah. And the governor of Illinois is not going to have it because they talk about sending troops to Chicago, right?
Yeah. And let's just understand what law enforcement does. Law enforcement, you either see crime and arrest people, or you investigate crime based on evidence, and you have detectives, none of which the National Guard is suitable for doing.
Right.
So all they can really do is guard buildings. That's what they did in Los Angeles. They spent $150 million guarding federal buildings for 30 days. They can do that in Chicago, but they can't go out and make arrests. They don't have a database to analyze crime, to haul in suspects. So they're really going to serve no useful purpose. They're not really serving a useful purpose in Washington other than simply just being there. And people like the fact that they're there. And if you are, riding a subway late at night and there's somebody on the platform, I suppose that is reassuring, but it's not really bringing down the crime rate.
And along the same lines, we talked before we started today about Republican values and how they've changed. The states' rights thing is kind of starting to sway out of the Republican platform. And now, as you put it when you sent me an email, socialism has come to the Republican Party.
Socialism has come to the Republican Party because the president this week took a 10% stake in Intel. He also demanded a federal percentage of the chip exports to Asia and what he called the golden share when he approved the Japanese takeover of U.S. Steel. The U.S. government received shares in the new company, and so we're now a stockholder. Bernie Sanders had this to say: "I'm so glad the Trump administration is in agreement with the amendment I offered 3 years ago." And that sort of sums up all of these stakes. And real philosophical conservatives, including today the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal, the Orange County Register, National Review, and conservatives across the country, and principled people in Congress who I don't always like, but even Rand Paul said, this is outrageous. This is a complete violation of everything we have stood for. And Republican MAGA members like to stand and holler about socialism and creeping socialism and all of that. And the big argument for carrying guns is so you need to have your guns in case they send the troops to take over your city. So there is a lot of confusion going on in MAGA world about whether we're socialists or not, about whether troops occupying American cities is good, and whether we should get our guns out and go meet them or not. So all of that sort of rhetoric is beginning to bollocks up on itself and create some real issues.
And might play a part in the upcoming elections.
Well, I think so, too. I think, if MAGA can't decide which side is socialist and which side is not, they may just not pick a side and go home.
And which means they just won't vote.
They won't vote, right, yeah.
Yeah. And we've talked about those issues in past elections, too. People get fed up. They just don't vote.
The election I came of age with was the 1974 post-Watergate election. Nixon had won 49 states. Republicans were riding high. But Republican voters were so disillusioned with the scandal and having thought that they'd been lied to by Nixon that they stayed home in droves. And in enough droves across the country that I think the Democrats got 70 House seats, took control of the Senate, set the stage for Jimmy Carter's election. Jerry Brown beat Hugh Flournoy by 3 points in a race that California's Republicans should have had as governor, changed the entire complexion of the state for a generation.
Wow.
So that's what can happen.
Yeah, what I love about having you on the show is you have an ingrained history of these sort of things that people lose as time goes on, and you add so much to what we talk about by putting it into a historical perspective. So I have to give you props for that, Keith.
Well, thank you, Mike. When I can cite a 50-year-old election, I can do so often without fear of contradiction because nobody was alive then.
All right. Anything else we need to talk about?
Well, a couple of things. The big, beautiful bill was renamed this week. It's now the Great Big Tax Cut Bill because apparently Big, Beautiful Bill wasn't working very well in the congressional town halls and in the other things. So they're trying to change the name there. And then I think we should take notice of the fact that the biggest news this week was not done by Donald Trump for the first time ever. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are going to get married. It was such a big event that even Donald Trump himself was compelled to send congratulations.
Yeah, and he was very cordial about it. I was blown away by that. So, yes.
He can read the polls, too.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Good episode of Red versus Blue. Thank you all for continuing along with us. We know you're out there. We have ways of knowing that. And we appreciate you participating with us. And we will be back. Like us on Facebook. Share the show with your friends or your enemies. And we will be back again with another edition of Red versus Blue.
Thanks for listening, everybody.